So, hi everybody, this is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. So today we're going to talk a bit more about the Mandela effect that we started on the last call. But as we said during that call, not all that convincing a case to be built that people share false memories kind of spontaneously, automatically, like it's some sort of a naturally occurring phenomenon. Instead, we thought, well, people can certainly have false memories installed in them. And if someone tells us often enough or loudly enough or in enough forms and we get enough residents in a population can tell us, oh no, I remember that, I remember that, I remember that, then it does ultimately become something that is a shared false memory, but it's an installed memory, not one that just kind of arose spontaneously. So that's kind of where we left off last time around. Any thoughts, comments about that? Are we in agreement?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then I said, but these installers of this, so how do false memories get installed? Well, of a lot of it does happen to do with just sheer coincidence, and that's how we can sort of look at things like people not remembering the Jif as the name of the peanut butter, not Jiffy, or something like that. You know, there's a whole lot of pop kind of cultural things that we can look at each one of them and kind of go like, no, that's just people got hit with sufficient advertising or sufficient shared belief within a community that they came to believe it was a memory. And so they said, well, the most sinister side of this would be that if I wanted to manipulate you, my primary goal, I believe, would be to install false memories, not just false beliefs, false memories in whatever population it is that I'm trying to influence, one way or another. So, why do you think they would do that? Why would a memory, installing a false shared memory, be so powerful?
well, it manipulates the outcome.
Manipulate. Tell us a little bit about that. And Kathy, you want to throw something in there? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I mean, it suits the agenda of whoever it is, and it's incredibly powerful
Mhm.
for in a population for culture change.
Right.
Very
Right.
powerful.
Yep. Yep. Well, let me throw it out this way. I think it's pretty easy for us to rescue someone from a manipulator who has simply given them false information, false data. We can correct that, and people would be open, receptive enough to doing that. Now, if they start to go beyond that simple factual knowledge sort of thing, they may now start holding it as a belief, and that belief could then be magnified into like a shared value, and that shared value could be like substantiated or whatever, or locked in place by a false memory. So I think as I go from this false knowledge up to false memories, things are getting stronger and stronger. The bond between the individual and the manipulator is getting stronger and stronger. And so I guess the best way for me to put it is that um, a person convinced against their will is never truly convinced. And so it doesn't matter. Once someone holds something in that shared value and shared memory kind of level, I think they're going to go like, there's no amount of information you can tell us. It's going to change a thing. It's just not. So I know I'm babbling there, but you guys get the point I'm trying to go to? Yeah, David, someone?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I do.
I mean, I get it. I am insane, but this is how my
No,
mind
no, no,
works.
no, no. This is very fascinating. I think it's absolutely true, and you can see it happening in our culture,
That's right.
all the time.
Yeah, and so we go like, all right, I don't know if they're doing that in a calculated, deliberate way. For all I know, they're just doing it, and it's part of their nature or whatever their instinct is telling them is going to work. I don't know if there's a whole bunch of advisors out there that are going to sit down and teach you how to manipulate the daylights out of anybody and everybody you want. So I don't know that people are really doing it in as calculated a fashion as I know they could be doing it if they knew about tension management. They knew what we're talking about. So I think that a lot of it is happening kind of accidentally, incidentally. Maybe it's just something that happens because we're all exposed to messaging. And as we get exposed to certain messaging, we might start chatting with other people who have also received that same messaging, whether the messaging was good, bad, right, or wrong, doesn't matter. They're sharing it. It's becoming more and more of a collective conscience. Or yeah, and then that's how I think it's going to ultimately morph if it continues to be fed, if it continues to be what am I say, shared, and the higher up it goes, the more difficult it becomes to get someone out of that pattern. Daniel, welcome. How are you?
I'm absolutely fascinated with this conversation.
All right, go right ahead. What would you like to throw
I
in?
have a couple of inputs I'd like to make to it. First, personal experience. I lived with false memory for many years,
Mm,
and how I got it may be of interest to this conversation.
mhm,
And that is that I was a young Marine. I had been through all of my military type of training, and then I was put into my technical training, which was in electronics, and given advanced training in quantum physics and all that kind of stuff, which really warped a young man's mind.
yeah.
um, and I got to my first actual duty station, and was put into a transient barracks where people who were going to and coming from Vietnam. It was 1971.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm sorry, it was 1970. And a long trip, tired, drunk, from my first experience at a military bar. And in the midst of all of these young guys going to Nam and these old veterans returning from Nam, and the stories that they told, and being a wide open slate. And this is really the important part. I
Mhm,
was a wide open slate to whatever came in
mhm,
for
mhm.
years. I had an experience a few years later, and the only thing I could relate it to was that I was in Nam, and this terrible thing happened, which I will not recount.
Mhm, mhm.
But it was recounted there. I did some hypnotherapy, and went back and was able to retrieve and understand that there I was lying in a stupor.
Yeah.
And the stories went, and I found myself the character in the story.
Ah, so you not only absorbed it, you kind of like internalized it and
Absolutely
manifested
internal,
yourself in the storyline.
because the layer of protection that resides between the subconscious and conscious mind, that critical layer, was not present.
Hmm. Hmm.
it was partying, and so that's one thing. That's one thing, just for consideration. The other thing is that back in the 80s, 90s, there was I don't know what's happened to it now. It was called neocons,
Hmm.
new conservatives, neocons, and
Yeah.
they were exactly doing the training leading us to where we are today.
Oh, very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, we should.
What's important to realize is many of the people who are in positions went through that training.
Hmm.
They're
That's
viruses.
interesting.
They are viruses.
And so, as they do their work, this viral work, do you think that they are doing it with the same calculated intention, or I guess are they
The,
sinister? I guess is the question.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, to those who do not agree with their
Right.
stand, they are
Yeah.
sinister.
Yeah. Yep.
To
Yep. Yep.
those who agree with their stand, they are patriots.
Hmm. Right. 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 Or they're, cult members or whatever, because I'm sure we can see how does this all play out, this whole manipulation and installing false memories. How does that actually play out? Even if we talk about something like Scientology.
Well, there was a Russian defector back in the 80s who said that he described active measures. You mentioned something about it shortly ago.
Yeah.
And active measures is really about interfering with the culture. And that's all been a part of, as I get it, it's one of the reasons I left the military industrial complex when I was 30, because I had 12 years of getting familiar with it and understanding that there's a good side and there's a bad side. There's a dark side.
Right. And I guess, if you break it down to its essence, then we're all programmed. And so that's the question. I don't know if you were on our listen last week's call or whatever, but we were also talking about how dopamine comes into play. And does dopamine enhance your ability to, what's the relationship between dopamine and the formulation of memory? And so, well, Brian's on the call. Brian, you're a kind of resident neurochemist. So is it fair to say dopamine interferes with creating accurate memories?
Yes, because what the brain is always looking for is a strong association, a partner, a program. And so anything new in particular is going to be set against what's already quite familiar. So, in other words, what's already incentivized.
Yeah.
So for dopamine to work in your favor in that regard, you need acetylcholine, which comes from being intense, very intentional in what you're doing. You need repetition. That's where you're building new pathways, new neuron pathways.
And so I guess if it really is just then part of how our lives are lived, we have to kind of go, well, to what degree is it necessary to recognize and defend ourselves against it? So how are we able to not just draw a line, but recognize that a line needs to be drawn? I think if we can explore that question, we can better understand how to help a greater part of the population do it, because until they become aware of something, how could they begin to really do anything to challenge these false memories or false values, or false shared, beliefs, etc.? Something has to challenge it. Something has to interrupt the pattern in a sufficiently, what do we say, robust, intense way to actually get their attention.
Right. I think the awareness is the key to it, what it seems like to me. And that pattern interrupt that you just described is often experienced if you look at a lot of the social issue crises around the world. It tends to be, all of a sudden thing, which means that there was a lack of awareness, right?
Mm.
So like how we're kind of, I talk about the political discourse right now, how normalizing these behaviors. And so you start to see these pockets like all around the world, even here. I'm in Venezuela this week, where these extreme behaviors are, they're reporting on it. So I'm like, okay, are you guys getting this from, the United States, or where are you getting this from? Because this is not typically your culture per se. So where is this coming from? So you start to see these kinds of dynamics of this normalization, and then you'll see that it's kind of like the frog in hot water, right? Before it becomes soup.
Yeah. It doesn't realize it if it's happening slowly. Yep. Well, and
so can I toss something in on that?
Please do, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the frog in hot water, because if you think about it, if that frog is just being comfortable, but then happens to step on a hot spot on the pan, that will launch the frog out of the pan.
Yeah.
So it's about how do you light a fire, under the foot of people, to get them to raise their foot and say, oh my God, reality is different. The king has no clothes. And I think that has a lot to do with really cognitive modification.
Mhm.
How do you get people to go from being uncaring, unconcerned, to having skepticism and engaged in critical thinking.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
You
And
know,
so that
T,
becomes,
something that's interesting about what just described this critical thinking, because it seems like we're losing that aspect. So the awareness, in other words, should underscore an opportunity to learn, but the exact opposite of that would be the practice of resistance, right? And so then you don't learn from even the so-called bad parts or these bad things. So you don't learn to question as to why they're happening.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I'd
And so
love to
that,
comment on that. That whole idea of critical thinking is such an important skill set that I think that our educational system it has been diminished in our educational system over the last 30 years or so, where people, except in very privileged situations, very privileged educational situations, have really lost the skill set of critical thinking, which deprives us of a tool for, as you were saying, being aware, so that when you step on the hot spot, you go, oh, wow, something is different. And what does this mean? What does this mean for me and for the broader context? And I think that you have more of the opportunity for this memory shift and memory manipulation when you have a population that is increasingly incapable of critical thinking.
Mhm. Mhm.
mm,
And that would be part of your cultural engineering.
mhm.
Oh yeah.
The Russian operative back in the 80s, said that we've already been doing this for over 30 years, and it continues to this day, and today it's wide open.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of the school systems have as one of their most critical things is to have critical thinking. They have put it in a lot of the curriculum, they have put it in a lot of their things. So again, I'm hearing that there is a lack of it in the school system, and yet I see the opposite. I
Mhm.
don't see the results of critical thinking, but they say they have it in there.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
But how can you teach it, because the neocortex is getting hijacked, and you know impulsive behavior, it's all coming from the limbic system, our decision making. And so it's like a prune, it's dying. So
Well,
the school systems can bring it in, but the brain isn't functioning on that level at all because of distractions, because of dopamine addictions to
Mhm.
devices and all of that. So the whole structural thing is not in place.
Well, I think that personally, I think you have to go back to how are you approaching critical thinking? And if you're doing it through questions, which is the only way you can really change stuff, is to teach them how to really question. Because
Mhm.
questions lead to decisions, lead to actions.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'd like to suggest that there's more than one way, and one way is to not be so protective,
Mhm.
not be so overly, helicopter parenting. That is a big influence. Why do I need critical thinking skills when all the thinking is being done for me?
Well,
Mhm.
and that goes back then,
Well,
what is the accountability of the parents? And
Yeah, the age you were talking
there is
about.
there is no repercussion if the parents are not accountable,
Well, there's
because
no
they are
license
accountable
required to
for
do
the
it.
education.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh.
The other thing I'd like to mention about, a big impact on critical thinking and the development thereof is diversity, is the ability to be in a diverse environment where people do question you simply because they are different in thinking. I mean, and it's diversity in thought, as much as it is diversity in the other factors. But travel, being in different situations like what Brian is doing right now, but you know, being in a learning environment where people are in fact different and question differently just sparks and makes your brain grow in different ways. And I think, you know, also sparks critical thinking. It's just another aspect of developing critical thinking, I think.
Makes it very uncomfortable to come home for some people.
Yeah.
Because you've become a different animal in your own home.
Yeah, and so
And T, please, which direction are we going?
well, I mean, ultimately, we want to see how it overlays on the change grid, but I want to get back to something that you said, Daniel, and that was that you recognized, or in retrospect, you recognized that there was a gap that wasn't, what I want to say, addressed as that, and so things got in to your mind and into your beliefs and into your memories because there was something missing. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Because I'm kind of curious to know what is that? Is that thing critical thinking?
That thing is not critical thinking. It's the sublayer.
Okay,
Yeah,
tell
so,
us.
something has to trigger that, right? Because again, when you look at how neurons communicate with each other, the language that is used is it literally must fit like lock and key. And so behaviors are very uh, distinctive and incentivized to do what, you know, whatever that incentive is designed to do. So when something is introduced, an idea, a thought, it came from somewhere. And oftentimes what people don't understand is our minds are always surveying the environment. So a lot of times, again, the brain is just playing catch up to where the body has already been. So something is triggered in the environment externally or perhaps internally. It could have been you read something, seen something, something triggered that, and then that becomes the opportunity. But for most people, because what's familiar is the path that's the strongest, they'll just dismiss it. And again, that leads to this normalization. Because, you know, like for me, all these different countries that I'm going through and have lived in offers a different perspective, because now people are saying, well, wow, so you're in America now. Is it really that bad? Because, you know, I'm traveling here in Venezuela with security because of the political unrest here. So each country has its own kind of model, and it gets me to question different things about civility, about what role the cultural dynamics play, and how do we get out of these culture of and crises kinds of moments that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And as you say that, I'm listening to everything that you said and reflecting on what you were talking about regarding my description, and wanted to offer something I think is absolutely wonderful when heads come together, minds come together. Is that what's normal in any society, right? Yeah. It's easy to stack onto normal what normal accepts.
Yep.
Right? Yep. It's easy to stack onto normal what normal accepts. So in any culture, shifting a culture, right, manipulating the mindset is going to be based on what that culture was already keyed to accept.
That's right. And so that's why I think it's kind of interesting to then see, does it overlay on the change grid, and does that give us any insights that can help understand the specific scenarios you guys have been describing and the questions about critical thinking and that. So let's just look at the mechanism of that manipulation for just a second. So there's somebody who wants to rule the world, who wants to, get all of your money, who wants you to join their cult, whatever it is. There's someone out here and they've got some sinister plan. Now, in order to get you to come under their spell, if you will, they've got to put out there the magic. They have to they have to deceive us. As long as we are under their spell, they're going to get what they want. And so the question becomes, How is the spell cast? When does it become so strong? How do I break the spell? You guys have talked a great deal about how to break the spell, but that awareness piece is the one we really have to start with. So now the manipulator may very well say, I'm going to look at a certain population and where they're already congregating. You guys have already mentioned that there is kind of like a cultural or collective kind of a mindset that might exist based on current connections and histories and all that sort of stuff. So I might see that there is a group of people who are already, in our words, upgrid. If I want to control them more, do I control them by moving them downgrid or by moving them further upgrid?
Moving them further upgrid.
Moving them further upgrid. And so now think about what's happening up there as far as why would someone remain in that upgrade state? And why is that very far upgrade, even danger zone state, useful? It gets back to this idea about installing false memories. In all likelihood, the manipulator is going to be deceiving people in words, actions, deeds, all the different things. They're lying to us. And so those lies have to go beyond just sounds I heard, beyond beliefs I hold, all the way up to memories I have. Because once it gets locked into a memory, good luck trying to change that, unless there is, as you guys have already pointed out, some sort of a pattern interrupt. So that's the second question. If someone can be aware that something's happening, when does their brain say enough? It's time to look at what's really going on.
When they get sentenced to federal prison.
When they get sentenced to federal prison, whenever, whatever, keep in mind, again, this is all going to be ultimately dopamine driven. So they're up there because they are either under the belief that without this individual, life as they know it will crumble. And so they're in grave, grave danger and therefore must be rescued by the superhero here. Well, you can imagine that there's a little bit of dopamine coming into play there. And so, obviously, Brian, you could give us all the mechanics if you want, but I think it really is just that dopamine helps us focus on things. And whether we're focusing on a lie or the truth, dopamine is kind of a focusing sort of a thing. And what I think it's focused on is finding more dopamine.
Absolutely.
Is that why we call it dope?
Yes.
Think about, you were talking about,
Yes.
is there really a connection? And
Yes.
I didn't know that. How interesting.
Yeah, because remember, none of the neurotransmitters act as a single actor, and some of them, like dopamine, cortisol, they're actually has a hormonal effect, and so they're long lasting, and they impact many areas, not just one.
Yeah, well, and see, Brian, I don't know if this was I don't know where you were when you were like, let's go say 40 years ago. Well, you were a kid. So we remember distinctly when advertising, public service announcement, things like that all talked about dope, 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 dope. And dope was just kind of like a generic term for any and all illicit drugs or whatever.
Yeah, why do you think they
And
call
don't
it
be a
dope,
dope.
kid?
Don't be a dope, do this kind of stuff. This is your brain on dope, and they put an egg in a frying pan. So I did not realize that there was kind of a connection in the word dope and dopamine.
Oh, your sudden flash of brilliance.
I mean, I'm saying we just got our money's
Oh gosh,
worth today's call.
that was so old. Yeah. Why do you think they call it dope?
Yeah, I don't think I was in the United States at that point in
but
time, but I do know, and I think Edie and I had a short conversation about that, and how when they talk about dopamine and drugs, and each drug has a different dopamine intensity and effect. So cocaine and heroin are uniquely different experiences. So you can't just say, oh, this is what's causing the addiction. Methamphetamine, again, those receptors that bind to the neurotransmitters has a lingering, a horrible effect. When you talk about what makes something very, very addictive.
Yeah.
And so not all dope is created equal.
No.
Amen to that.
Yeah, well, so but my, my point is that if I want to manipulate the population, a certain segment of that population is easily manipulated by moving them very far upgrid into that danger zone. Keep in mind what I'm doing. If you look at the engagement rings, keep in mind that what I'm doing is I'm moving them up as I am moving out of whatever engagement energy they had. I'm moving them out of whatever intention energy they may have remaining. They're going to be trapped in a ball of awareness, an awareness that doesn't have any ability to correct itself.
There's a name for that place,
Do
or
tell.
one of the places. It's called Pornhub.
Pornhub. There you are. Yeah, right. Where people are getting constant dopamine releases.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. I mean, you want a good example that'll stick with everybody. There it is.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who can
Um,
type well with one hand, yes.
Oh,
So
listen.
T, you know how we
This
talk
is a
about
recording. Kids listen to these.
I use voice.
you know how we talk about the center of the change grid all the time. I'm thinking like, from a position perspective, how we always use baselines, and everyone has different baselines and thresholds, and that is relative to their tolerance for different medications and different interventions. So I'm wondering, is it the same thing when we're talking about this manipulation? I'm reminded of a professor, I think he's professor emeritus at NYU, that studies social crises, and he talks about this idea. He studies social crises from like the intern camps, Nazis, and camps, slavery, and he talks about this idea of dehumanization. And when you can take away or strip successfully someone's identity and remove them from what's understood about communal, like their community, you have the onset of dehumanization, and that leads to these kind of manipulative things. And I remember he had some kind of research about cults and all these different kinds of things. And so when you're dealing in a false identity, there is this ongoing false awareness that just keeps building momentum, kind of like, big snowball rolling down a hill. Next thing you know, you have no identity other than what's being presented.
All right, so let's explore that on the change grid. Where on the change grid do people have the, I want to say, worst self-perception, or the, I just say faultiest one way or another self-perception? Where does someone lose
Deep
self-esteem?
in
In-grid, very far in-grid. And so, this is another manipulation that this perpetrator may very well want to do. And that is to take a person who may very well have been engaged and somehow or another criticize their behavior or whatever. So they stop doing whatever they're doing, and they need to start thinking about this instead. They need to have that. And then you slowly get them to abandon intentions. And now they're just aware, but I don't want them to be aware. So very quickly, I need to become increasingly demoralizing, increasingly dehumanizing to them. I have to basically go from being this, I want to say, manipulator to suddenly being someone's bully, someone's, whatever.
You're describing the process of Marine Corps boot camp.
Oh, all right then. So that means there is some application of it.
And trafficking.
Oh, right. So, and then, we have to look at the third one just so we can come back to this. So, Brian, I think this is explaining yours. This is, I can control you if I can dehumanize you by moving
See,
your
that's
behavior.
interesting too. And is it Daniel that just mentioned
Yes,
Marine
Daniel.
training?
Yeah.
So like in DC, I remember meeting an admiral and he taught at the War College, and I asked him, how do you win a war per se? Because, no one really wins, in my opinion, if lives are lost. And he told me about the whole training aspect and how they detrain civilians to think militarily. He literally said that. It's because he said we can't have people asking questions. They're trained to take orders.
Right. Yep.
And I was like, wow, that's it. And so they have a lot of problems I see in transitioning out of the military. Like they're still talking,
Yes.
in those terms like, oh, my CO. And I was like, okay, but what does that mean? Commanding officer. Also, you mean your manager, supervisor. So
Mhm.
all this detraining, and then they're looking for to be told what to do is what I've seen in some of the veterans that come in for health services kind of thing. It's an interesting dynamic.
I'd love to talk further with you offline on those.
I'll
Yeah,
make
it's
sure you
very
guys have each other.
interesting.
I'll make sure you have each other's contact information.
Thank you.
So because Brian, you brought this one up, you've just brought up the fourth one I was going to talk about, and that is that sometimes the manipulators, as they are out there trying to frighten the daylights out of somebody, or trying to dehumanize them, or trying to get them to just become so quiet and passive, and that they just aren't even paying any attention, move them totally off the radar, so they're hypo aware. The other thing that I can certainly do if I want my outcome to grow, I have to find other people who will join my army of manipulators. And so as I'm out here trying to do these manipulations or whatever, I'm going to notice there's some people who I can't push past awareness. They're always aware that, and look where they're in the center of the change grid. They can see what's really going on. For a moment, they see the truth. But I've got to get them past that if I'm going to do that. But if they kind of look at me, I go, well, join my forces. So I'm helping them develop new intentions to get engaged in a different way to become my minions, my messengers, my enforcers, my whatever I need, because as a single person, I can only do so much. But as a single person with an army of believers, it's not just an army that I control. It's an army I've actually enlisted, won over to my way of thinking. And yeah, they see that there's some benefit in it from them, or for them rather, whether it's getting treated better in the short run or it bodes well for whatever their future life control may be. There it is. They've been romanced into. They've been pulled into it.
But and I don't know if you said it at the beginning, T, but did you start with saying that they start off with people who are disaffected?
Oh, yeah. No, we did that on a different call in a deep dive, but no, we just briefly mentioned on that there are populations that are already more susceptible. And I think,
Absolutely.
and because they're feeling out of control in other areas of life, these individuals are going to be more upgrid. And so if I want that population, the messaging has to be different than the messaging I would use if I was trying to go, make people further and further down grid. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the not to be mistaken for people who are on the street, but within in any group at any level of class in society.
Mhm. Yep.
The people who want to be a part of that group
Yep.
and they can't get in. And if you can show them a way into that group, right? If you can help solve the problem of group entry, then there's your manipulation.
Yep. Absolutely right. And I think we were talking about culture. We said that every human being is actually a member of many cultures simultaneously, because you have a culture based on heritage, and you have a culture based on education level, and you have a culture based on your favorite football team or whatever it happens to be. We are all members of multiple cultures simultaneously. And sometimes the cultures that we start to add to our collection of cultures we're part of, they're going to be similar to those. It's not likely they're going to adopt a totally different one. And so there's all that reinforcement, and there's all that attraction of similar situation or similar thinking, believing people.
Do you
So,
think that causes a challenge, like in America? What I noted when I came there, everyone uses a hyphen, right?
last
So
names.
yeah, the hyphen in terms of their culture identity.
Oh
So
yeah.
they ask like race, and there's only two colors in the crayon box, and then you move towards ethnicity, but there's the hyphen there. And
Yeah.
so when I asked the question before, like, what's American? Because if someone's seen me, they'll just automatically say African American.
Yeah.
And I was not born or raised in America, so I wouldn't identify with
Yeah.
that. But they may not understand that because it's based on
Yeah.
these particular characteristics.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Americans traveling abroad and seeing Black people think of them as African Americans.
Yeah,
It
so I
more
wonder,
than
does that create
mind.
confusion though?
Right.
Does that
They've never
create
been to the
confusion?
country.
Yeah, just an example of that, it warped my mind the first time I saw a Black person speaking German.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go. Right. Because
Yeah,
those two things
yeah.
don't go
I,
together
I
in our mind.
apologize for that, but it's true.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you need to apologize for. That's why I was asking, because I think it creates, like, when we left South Africa, the first country I lived in was Kenya, and I remember the kids. I was 9 or 10, so quite young lad, but 9 or 10, I was Mzungu. Mzungu in Swahili is outsider. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, 90% of the population reflects somewhat of the same skin hue as me, but I'm outsider.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, yes, you're African, but you're not part of our tribe.
Right. Because the tribe is a different culture than being, whether it's African or being, whatever the country they affiliate with or whatever. Yeah. So it's a real part of multiples. And unfortunately, that means I'm helping the manipulator to better target the messaging that will resonate most powerfully with me based on those cultures. On the other hand, imagine that I just want you to comply. I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to comply. There's a whole bunch of people who have no tension about the subject matter, period. And so they're kind of going like, I genuinely don't care. And so because they don't care, they're going like, yeah, whatever you want, whatever. This is that apathy kind of response, this hypo awareness. I don't even want to learn about it. I don't want to hear about it, whatever. Just, do whatever you got to do. So do you realize how big of a slice of the population I've just described?
It seemed like we're
70%.
there now.
Well,
Like, people are tired of this political nonsense of going back and forth, close down the government, not close down the government. That's what I'm
so there's
hearing.
a
Is people
population,
tired.
there's part of the population is very upgrid about it, and part of it are being moved in grid and don't realize it. And the army is there, the army is building, and you got these people that are downgraded. You've just moved because you're kind of going like, I don't have the need to deal with it, and I don't have the energy to deal with it.
Or the bandwidth.
The bandwidth,
Mm,
there you go. I mean, I
mm,
just don't. I just don't.
yeah.
So that to me
And
is this hypo-aware kind of thing. Well, what do I, as the manipulator, need the message to this population to be? Because again, I believe there are a lot more of these people than there are
Mhm.
these people that are upgrade. But the upgrade people complain and grumble, and they go to rallies, and they have causes and missions and T-shirts and whatever it is. These are the people that are promoting. These people are just kind of going like, yeah, whatever.
the message to them is you're doing just fine.
You're doing just fine. You're
Mm.
doing just fine. You don't need to do anything. We got it all under control.
Wow.
Take a nap. Take a nap.
And your tactic is to find those areas where they are up grid.
Yeah. Yep.
Make
Yep.
friends with them. Find the areas where they are up grid, abortion.
Yep. 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 And so you can see
Right.
this playing out in all areas of what, life as we live it.
Mm.
Well, and what's fascinating is I mean, I did live this because I was part of the intelligence
Yep.
operation. And so I mean, this is how it works.
Yep.
This is how it goes. And
Yep.
and the intelligence to do this manipulation has been going on, and the concern that it's in our colleges is because it's in our colleges.
Yeah.
It's not what the concern gets published as, but that there's only one outcome that can come from all of the social psychological research, cross-sectioning and dissecting and understanding everything about how everything operates.
Yep.
And that is so that somebody can use it to manipulate.
Well, and this is exactly right. So whether I'm looking at the way that an educational institution is structured, or a business or religion or whatever, there is always somebody who's going to be in charge of reaching these objectives through these different people, through these different energies. So what's my message to the hyper aware, or what's my message that will lead to hyper awareness? Because in all likelihood, the population is healthier than that, but to better manipulate them, I need to aggravate their condition. Oh, that was something I was going to share earlier. I think that one of the challenges we face as human development professionals that are really trying to have a positive impact on all this craziness we've just been talking about is we go like, we just really need to make these people more aware. We need to give them tools. You know, we want to put them through the workshop. We're going to do whatever. And I think it was Brian who then said, yeah, and then it never gets applied because was it Edie was talking about the limbic system is going to hijack them. So there are plenty of people who've received plenty of training who completely forget about it or can't access it when they're triggered by some other kind of way.
I have a suggestion about that.
Yep.
See,
Yep.
and you know, when we do training and we do a lot of work to pump people up, right? Get people excited about it.
Yep.
Because it releases dopamine and they're having fun.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But then when it comes to doing the work, the limbic system says, shit, this is not going to be any fun.
Right.
People I had fun with aren't around.
You're right. Right.
Right.
Go like, no, I don't need to do it. So
what we miss is that it's the pleasure and reward of doing the behavior that has to provide the dopamine.
Ideally, you're absolutely correct. And that would be, again, moving people out grid, but not into the danger zone, obviously. But that's what you're right. So if I go, well, I know there's dopamine out here, but is there something else unique? And I think it was on the map of all the neurotransmitters, we figured out it was going to be the endorphins come into
Yes,
play
you
here.
create the situations of adrenaline. You want to close that action result gap. And
Right.
so you build that through like these micro steps and these doses of adrenaline. You get a rush, and that includes like even endorphins and the dopamine, these things working together. But you want to do it in a way that they can learn from it, because then they're going to continue to not only be engaged, but they're going to want more of that experience.
Yeah, you're right. Ideally, you're absolutely right. But you know, at the very base of it, their brain is doing this. It doesn't explain itself as it does it. It just basically says, well, when you're in this kind of a situation, I need to give you a little dose of adrenaline or the endorphins, something that's going to be more stimulating. Because if I look at the map, that that endorphin wasn't elsewhere. It was kind of uniquely here. On the change grid. And so I go like, all right, well, I have to go back to the thing.
Just to hit on that, the promise of endorphins is to feel good.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And where do you want to feel good? You know, if there's nothing around you that you're particularly interested in.
Right.
You know, if everything's just fine, then when are you going to feel good?
Yeah. And that's what this hypo awareness thing is.
And I would suggest to you that our current state of union building, right? People feel good out there on the picket line.
Right, because the way that unions operate is they want their members to feel as though the challenge is great so that they will mobilize as they need to be mobilized. But at the same time, the union is saying, you do face great challenges, and we are the ones who are bringing the ability to handle those challenges. Therefore,
yeah, it's an impossible challenge, and you are up to it.
Right. And so we want our members to be as far down grid as possible. Where again, power apathy, we delegate whatever is going on. If you're in apathy, it's already been delegated. So, you know, so this again, it's a manipulation that's basically occurring, and it occurs in at every level, every kind of an organization. It is not always a negative thing. And
Mhm.
we have to kind of say like, well, the reason why this whole mechanism exists in the world of interactions, at the human level or whatever, is because it does have some sort of value under some sort of circumstances. Like, for example, if I have someone who is actively engaged in executing on all kinds of plans that I know are ultimately going to do the wrong thing, and I come along, as Kathy was pointing out, and start asking some questions, or T was pointing out, asking the right kind of questions, I can get them to back off energetically. I can get their curiosity to go up, that the puzzle that needs to be solved is more, let me say, in need of greater levels of tension than they'd be giving it up until now. So this is kind of a good, healthy, range of movement that will do very, very often. It's when the person is being deliberately moved to and maintained in these certain sections of the change grid where you will willingly relinquish all of your control to whoever it is that's in this outgrid position of power or influence or
I
whatever.
don't know why that song hurt so good. Who
Hurts,
who sung
hurts so good.
who sung that song hurt so good? But I was thinking when you're talking about the endorphins, because it does mask the pain, has an
Yeah.
opiate effect. And so like even though it doesn't feel good to move, to close this action result gap,
Right.
with the endorphins, and again, you're learning from it, you're masking the fear, the pain, the doubt, those kinds of things. And so you're creating a dopamine pathway that's uniquely different than if you did not have that same neural chemical soup, if you
Yep,
will.
exactly. And what you've just described is someone who is really in that expressive driver kind of place. So, because there is a puzzle that needs to be solved, and they are rising to the occasion, and they are very much engaged. Obviously the intention was there, but continued as it advanced into engagement, and they're doing those kinds of things that need to be done. This is what I wanted to say a while back, was that that's probably the right dopamine if our discussion is putting value judgments on these different, spoonfuls of dopamine. We're supposed to say, oh no, it's good for you to feel the dopamine that comes with completing something or accomplishing something or succeeding and growing and gaining and whatever those verbs happen to be. I don't know that's a hard and fast truth, or if that's just the cultural belief we hold at this particular place up the spiral, But
I could just to suggest that perhaps that is a part of the virus
yeah,
of progress.
right. Right. I've shared this with you guys before. One of the when I have a new physician, and whenever I'm getting a new physician, one of the first questions I want answered, and I don't necessarily ask it directly, but I want to know whether they're more concerned about longevity or about vitality. I want a doctor who's more about vitality for whatever longevity you've got. And I believe that by focusing on that, the longevity is likely to take care of itself. Where if the only thing they're focused on is longevity and not vitality, well, then why am I doing it? It's a lot of work, to take care of, to focus on longevity, and longevity at what cost? So I think
Right.
it's really kind of like the same thing. There's a value here that's being forced upon people if we're not thoughtful about it. And that is, we're telling them, you need to get your dopamine at the success store.
Right.
You don't get your
Right.
dopamine at the relax and just mellow out in life store. You don't get
Right.
it at it's like, who are we to be casting value judgments about these extremes?
Hang on. You
Yeah.
do get it at that place, except you get it at the rave on the weekends.
Well, and that's fine too, as long as it's a self-contained sort of an experience. All right, then that's all fine. In fact, I think that's why we go, we've talked about amusement parks a lot, but that's why this time of year people want to go to the haunted houses. They want to at least be put into a place that deceives them, or if it's good, it deceives them very, very successfully into believing that all of these costumed actors are real zombies or whatever. And they're paying top dollar to have the daylight scared out of them. And
Yeah.
if they walk out of that haunted house and it didn't do that for them, they're going to have a different response. In fact, I'll see if I can dig this up, but back, it's got to be right in the early 2000s or whatever. We did a blog posting about tension management and Halloween. I don't know if any of you have been around long enough to remember that. But we divided into 16 different squares and said that if the haunted house puts you here on the change grid, here's what's likely to happen. Because they want to make you frightened enough without triggering your punching reflexes. 'Cause the actors don't want to be injured, but if you get scared enough, what are you going to do? Well, that might be too far up grid for a good scare. But where's our dopamine coming from? It's coming from number one, the scare, because it does have that focusing quality to it. I get it that almost always people describe dopamine as the reward that you get. So whenever anything good or whatever is happening, that's not it. This isn't about pleasant anything at all. That's just about capturing your attention. But if I can move you down grid just a little bit, now the neurochemicals will change and suddenly you're getting a dopamine effect, but also this adrenaline rush that comes from the people that are the thrill seekers. The greatest thrill is surviving. Why do people jump up and down and hoop and holler when they get off of a good roller coaster? It just doesn't make
You have
sense.
to get circulation back in.
Yeah, because this is what their brain is telling them to do.
Yeah. See,
So-
it sounds like this is where this oracle of self comes in, because you have to have your own definition, it seems, of things like success and what fun is, or these kinds of things. But then it won't be that challenging, even if it is a challenge per se. And so that's where these different levels of dopamines can be emitted to do what it needs to do and work for you instead of against you.
Yeah.
Because I
And
remember
really-
reading an article just weeks ago about that question: is the American dream still possible? And I remember asking myself in my journals, like, well, what defines the American dream? Who defines it?
Yeah. What book? Is it your definition or is it a definition you've absorbed, or whatever? We're at the top of the hour, but I just want to throw one more thing out to you guys, just so we can have this in mind for our next conversation. Now we got the mechanisms through which this manipulator can do what they need to do. We said earlier, you got to be able to recognize that it's going on. And so I would throw out to you this question. If you are the human development professional working with an individual who is dealing with any of this manipulative, I want to say energy, manipulated energy, what do you do? Do you try to move them down out of hyper awareness and into awareness, then help them develop new intentions and then get engaged and blah, blah, blah? Do you move them up the challenge side of things if they're too far down grid? Or do you say, no, we just need to move them to the exact center of the change grid, and from there they will look at things in a very different light automatically? So, and if that's where
I
we
like
end
that
up,
last one.
what's that? Sorry, Daniel.
I said I like that last one.
Yeah, well,
I think that I look at the change grid very much like a martial arts mat,
mm-hmm.
and that being in the center is where you want to be.
Yeah. Right.
And you reach out and you want to be positioned mentally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, so that you can reach out in any direction at any time and achieve what needs to be achieved without getting lost.
Exactly. Staying inside of your nice green circle. This is where we want to live. And so, you're exactly right. So how then do we get people to do that? There's a lot of human development pros out there who would do all this work of just trying to boost someone's ability to handle this perceived challenge. And there's a whole bunch of people who would say, you've got all this great ability. We need to get you more involved. I want to raise your level of challenge. Or is it really just better all the way around to say, you just need to make sure you start every day at the center of the change grid. And every time you feel yourself off center, just get back to center. Get back to center, get back to, and then you can talk about what the world around you is actually really looking like and what, if anything, needs to be done, or regardless of that. And so the big protection against manipulation is you. And so, but you got to be reclaiming of all of the you that there is. And if part of you is under the control of someone else or something else, in the case of people that have got substance abuse issues and things like that, or not just something else, maybe we talk about the cultural, traditional, routine sorts of things that you're suddenly trapped in whatever those processes are. What's that really all about? Is it better to try to work inside of those things, or just say, why don't you just get yourself centered, find the genuine you, and then look around and see what's going on?
Well, you're talking about the truth, and as Bruce Lee said, nothing is more powerful, nor more difficult.
More difficult, right? So this is, again, what we're hoping to accomplish on the Oracle of Self calls on Mondays. But I think that a lot of what we want to share with those students are the things that we talk about on the Circle of Brilliance calls. And I know most of you participate in both of them. So, it ultimately all ends up being one and the same. But just to bring this little section on the Mandela effect to closure, I would like to talk about how do we go about not just, I don't want it to just be these big general, the world needs to do more of this. No, if this is your client, what's your strategy? How are you going to really do this? And talk a little bit more about the specific deployment of the method. Yeah. Okay. Final thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
Okay. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad. All right.
I just want to say hello to the group, and pleasure to be here, and I look forward to joining you more in the future.
Well, we look forward to having you, Daniel. Okay. All right, everybody. So have a wonderful next day or so. And by the way, just to get a reminder, so no one gets the daylight scared out of them, tomorrow at 2:20 p.m. Eastern time, they are doing a nationwide test of the emergency alert system, which means that your phones are going to blare that god-awful sound, and your TV is going to do it, and your radio is going to do it. And I think from attention management perspective, it's going to definitely get people's attention, but I'm spreading the warning out to everybody, again, as a tension management technique, so you could be expecting it and bury your phone. Whatever.
Is this going to be aliens attacking the Earth?
Yeah,
scenario?
because that's my big fear. That's why they've been talking about it in all the TV shows and all that. They've just been going like, people are going to think something is actually going down if we don't get them warned about this. So we have to, whatever. There you go. The skies are falling.
Golly.
All right, take care, everybody. We'll talk again soon. Bye.